In the late 1970s, a controversial Texas law prohibited undocumented children from attending public schools unless their families paid tuition. This law reflected growing fears about undocumented immigration and concerns about the financial strain on public services, particularly education. Families unable to pay the fees faced the devastating reality of their children being excluded from school, sparking a legal battle that ultimately reached the United States Supreme Court. In the 1982 Texas case Plyler v. Doe, the Supreme Court ruled that denying undocumented children access to public education violates their rights under the 14th Amendment, which reinforces the government's responsibility to uphold equal education access. This court case imposed a greater level of responsibility upon the government to support the welfare of all students, highlighting the critical role of access to education. This decision not only overturned Texas' discriminatory policy, but also established a foundation that continues to influence education and immigration policies to this day, underscoring the importance of protecting the rights of all individuals under the Constitution of the United States. The case of Plyler v. Doe can be better understood against the backdrop of Mexican immigration history, which includes pivotal events like the Mexican-American War and forced labor programs in the 1940s. The Mexican-American War, which began in 1846 and ended in 1848, resulted in the U.S. acquiring vast territories from Mexico, including Texas. This laid the groundwork for significant Mexican immigration in the following decades. Many Mexicans moved northward in search of better opportunities and to reclaim land that had been historically part of Mexico. During World War II, the U.S. faced labor shortages and initiated the Bracero program, which began in 1942 and ended in 1964, which brought millions of Mexican laborers to work in agriculture and railroads. This program significantly increased Mexican presence in the United States and established migration patterns that continued even after the program ended. Although the Bracero program was meant to be temporary, it set a foundation for the resilience on Mexican labor and contributed to the growth of undocumented immigration when formal work programs ceased. By the 1970s, economic pressures and political instability in Mexico prompted even more migration. Many Mexican immigrants sought better opportunities for their families in the U.S., with education seen as a key to achieving these goals. However, increasing numbers of undocumented immigrants led to continuous debates over public resources, particularly in states like Texas. In 1975, Texas passed Section 21.031 of the Texas Education Code, denying undocumented children access to free public education unless their families could afford the tuition. This law initiated significant legal challenges, bringing attention to the struggles and rights of undocumented Mexican immigrants and setting the foundation for a landmark case that would ultimately address the issue of educational access for all children, regardless of their immigration status. The families who challenged the law, with support from Maldef, argued that Texas violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, which ensures that no state shall deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. For these families, the stakes were high. Education was seen as the only means of providing their children with a better future in a new country. As one parent explained, "We came here to give our children a better life, but without school, they have no future." These families' desire to secure a chance at the American dream was at the heart of the case, which ultimately led to a 5-4 Supreme Court ruling in favor of the plaintiffs. In the majority opinion, Justice William Brennan emphasized the fundamental role education plays in a democratic society, stating that education has a fundamental role in maintaining the fabric of our society. Brennan warned that Texas' policy of excluding undocumented children would create a permanent underclass, preventing an entire generation from having the opportunity to contribute to society.
Of Latino young people and adults would be trying to make a life here without having received an education. And their ability to progress, their ability to become contributing members of society would have been almost completely blocked.
Brennan's words resonated with many, as he asserted that denying education to children based on their immigration status was not only unconstitutional, but also deeply harming to the broader community. Despite Texas' argument that educating undocumented children would strain state resources, the court found this argument unconvincing. Justice William Brennan wrote, "It is difficult to understand precisely what the state hopes to achieve by promoting the creation and perpetuation of a subclass of illiterates within our boundaries." The court rejected the notion that financial concerns could justify discriminatory policies, especially when those policies disproportionately targeted vulnerable children. Additionally, Texas had argued that providing education to undocumented children would encourage further illegal immigration, but the court found no evidence to support such claims. The ruling was not unanimous. Chief Justice Warren Burger, in his dissent, argued that immigration-related issues should be decided by Congress rather than the judiciary, stating that the Constitution does not provide a remedy for every social ill, nor should the court fashion one. However, the majority opinion carried significant weight, especially for the families involved. One plaintiff, reflecting on the case, said, "This case wasn't just about school, it was about dignity, about proving that our children deserved a chance just like anyone else." Ultimately, Plyler v. Doe was more than just a legal victory. It reaffirmed the nation's commitment to fairness, opportunity, and equality. The decision emphasized that education is not a privilege just reserved for a few, but a fundamental right necessary for creating an inclusive and equitable society. By ensuring that all children, regardless of their immigration status, have access to education, the court upheld the core principles of justice that define American society. The Plyler ruling guaranteed undocumented children access to public education, highlighting education's role in breaking cycles of poverty. This landmark decision continues to shape policies impacting immigrant communities. Decades later, programs like Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, also known as DACA, were built on the principles of Plyler by providing undocumented youth with temporary protection from deportation and opportunities for education and employment. However, this progress faces significant challenges. Under the Trump administration, immigration policies threaten to undermine the principles established by Plyler v. Doe. Efforts to cancel DACA jeopardize the futures of hundreds of thousands of undocumented students who relied on the program for educational and economic opportunities. Additionally, the administration's strict immigration enforcement policies raised fears that undocumented families might avoid enrolling their children in school out of concern for their safety. Despite these challenges, Plyler v. Doe remains a cornerstone of immigrant rights and educational equity. It underscores the importance of protecting vulnerable populations and ensuring that access to education remains a pathway to opportunity for everyone, regardless of their legal status. The ruling's impact is evident in the millions of lives who have benefited from it and in the continued advocacy for immigrant rights inspired by its principles. While the case addressed a specific issue in education, its legacy resonates far beyond the classroom, shaping how the United States defines its commitment to fairness, justice, and opportunity for all.
And these four families, that's just such an incredible amount of courage and, tenacity and integrity, and that's beautiful. And we worry so much about what's going on in the world, and with good reason. But as long as people stand up for what's right, we'll be fine.
The Supreme Court's Plyler v. Doe decision affirmed that the Constitution's rights apply to all individuals in the United States, regardless of their immigration status. The court emphasized the importance of education in fostering equality, opportunity, and welfare for all students. The case emphasized the government's responsibility to promote fairness and opportunity, protecting individuals' rights against discrimination. Plyler v. Doe remains a foundation in debates about immigration, education, and civil rights, demonstrating the judiciary's power to protect vulnerable populations and ensure the Constitution's promises apply to everyone. The case highlights that access to education is a fundamental necessity for building a just and equitable society. The impact of Plyler v. Doe extends beyond the classroom.